today to conduct matters of business. Please guide our hearts and minds in the spirit of fairness, right thought and speech. Impart your supreme wisdom upon our activities so that our affairs may reach a successful conclusion. Thank you for being our source of guidance today to the advancement and true welfare of all our people and of Australia. Amen. On behalf of Council, I wish to recognise the traditional custodians of the land upon which we meet today and pay Council's respect to elders both past and present and the only Aboriginal person present here today. Just a word on taping of the meeting. Just like to remind attendees that the meeting is recorded to facilitate minute taking. Minutes are also video recorded and streamed live online. Thank you. Apologies, I have an apology from Councillor Bailey. Could someone move that? Yes, Councillor Galletley, Councillor Gray. Any disclosure and declarations of interest today? None. Anyone? There's no one present for Have Your Say? No. Okay, we're moving on to the item of today's discussion, which is that Council notes the finalisation of the financial statements for the Armidale Regional Council as required by Section 419 of Local Government. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Tiley. I will get clarification on that. Thank you. A seconder? Councillor Moran. I would like two items. I'd like to suspend standing orders so we can hear a report on this. Oh. Okay, moving. May I request our Executive Officer that accept is okay? Yep. So change the word to accept, please. And now I'd like a mover for that we suspend standing orders to hear reports. Councillor Morat, Councillor Martin. Those in favour? Passed. So we have today James Sugama and Kenneth. I didn't catch Kenneth's last name, but Kenneth's are with us at the moment. They've done this report that you've all read, and would like just to let them do a presentation on what they found and then open it up for questions and answers.
Very good afternoon to Mayor Murray, Deputy Mayor Madam Robinson, councillors, council officers and members of the public. Thank you for the opportunity to present the Auditor General's conduct of the audit report for Armidale Regional Council. This is the first report by the Auditor General on this council. My name is James Sugama and I'm the delegated officer by the Auditor General responsible for the audit of Armidale Regional Council. I have completed the audit for the period 13th May 2016 to 30 June 2017 and issued the relevant audit reports. My manager Kenneth and I am here to briefly present the report on the conduct of the audit. Mr. Mayor, just before I present, I just want to give a very brief introduction as to how the Auditor General got into this position of auditing all the 140 councils in New South Wales. So the Local Government Amendment Act passed in October 2016 provided the mandate to the Auditor General to be the auditor of all local councils in New South Wales. And right now, we have, after all amalgamation, there are 140 councils we are auditing. The new mandate provided an opportunity to the Auditor General to offer insights to the local governments in terms of consistency and also the outcomes across the councils. And the Auditor General expects to issue a report to Parliament in March 2018 for the very first time in New South Wales. That would include the financial performance, financial reporting, the service delivery, and the governance arrangements for the 140 councils. It would be a very simple report we are trying to prepare. The first time we are doing that, we don't want to go into a greater details of doing so much of analysis, trying to keep it at a very high level so that there can be consistency and some insights into how council could better manage to forward the financial reporting. The mandate also provided the Auditor General to perform what we call the performance audits. So performance audits are the audits where the auditors look at the economy, efficiency, and effectiveness of transactions. So this is the first time we're going to conduct that audit across all 140 councils and trying to benchmark some sort of standard in conjunction with OLG and provide some reports. So the performance audit topics are selected by the Auditor General in consultation with OLG and also some discussion with some councils. And this year, we are planning to report on fraud prevention, service delivery, and some governance arrangements. So the draft report will be made available to the councils before that is being tabled into Parliament. Okay, this is an interesting council because you have had a significant change in the structure of the organization on 12th May. And the Local Government Amalgamation Proclamation 2016 amalgamated these two councils. And this is the very first time a set of financial statements prepared for this council. So as a result, you would see that the financial statements do not have a comparative for the previous year. So it is probably somewhat challenging to assess how well you have performed or how the challenges have been addressed because we don't have a comparison with last year. And we did not want to do a comparison simply aggregating the previous council. We did some analysis. We found that it was not meaningful, so we did not take that approach.
Mayor, through our contract audit agent, we have completed the audit for Armidale Regional Council, and we are pleased to actually announce that we have issued clean independent auditor's report on the financial statements. What this means is that the financial statements for council are true and fair. They've complied with the Australian accounting standards, the Local Government Act 1993, and the council has also maintained proper accounting records and provided relevant information to audit. So it's a clean audit opinion for the first year.
So Mayor, just moving on to the key primary financial statements, which is the income statement and the balance sheet. I just table a high-level summary in terms of your total revenue, total expenses, and your balance sheet. So you can see that the operating result is quite significant, 861 million. Obviously, that is an impact from the merger. So the Office of the Local Government decided the merger to be accounted by way of transfer of net assets. So that contributed about $845 million of net assets moving on from both assets, and that is contributed to your total operating result. You can also see the balance sheet, total assets going to $911 909 million, yes. And the liabilities stayed at 48 million. So the highlight of the income statement, just want to say some of those. Your rates and annual charges amounted to 29 million. The grants and contribution, which was a Commonwealth grant, received an early receipt of grant included in that, amounted to 38 million. And in terms of expenses, there were 29 million worth of material and contract expenses. And one significant other expense is the depreciation of 18 million.
So Mayor, this slide shows the cash position of the council. So cash and cash investments held by council was about 75 million. However, a large sum of that is actually restricted both internally and externally. So some significant external restrictions which locks the use of these funds include water and sewer funds of about 35 million, and you've got 23.4 million of special purpose funds that are locked in things like roads and other sorts of capital works. Some of the internal restrictions on your funding include about 2.2 million in plant and vehicle replacement funds and about 5 million for employee leave entitlements.
So Mayor, the OLG's benchmarking against performance of councils is based on the ratios. Now this is a summary of all the requirements against all the ratios benchmarked by OLG. So the council has achieved most of them. You can see that 2 ratios the council has not achieved. And I'll just talk on the specific ones. The first one is the operating performance ratio. It's a simple ratio, divide the operating results divided by the operating revenue, whether are you making sufficient margin to pay for your expenses and all that. So the operating performance ratio, the benchmark is just 0%, and the council has achieved that. There's no concern with that one.
So Mayor, this ratio is the own source operating revenue ratio. Council just came under it. It is 60%. What this is actually, it measures the degree that council is reliant on government funding. So the higher the ratio, the less reliant council is on government funding. The ratio is a bit skewed this year because of early receipt of certain grants, such as the financial assistance grant from the Commonwealth government. So this has sort of increased the ratio of government grants to your normal operating revenue per se. But it's not a huge, council has just come under it. It's not a very large variation.
So Mayor, the unrestricted current ratio is another important ratio for every entity, including council. This portrays the ability of meeting the liabilities as and when they fall due. So the council's benchmark is 1.5, and the council had no issue in meeting those ratios, which means the cash and the liquidity position of the council, it is reasonable to meet the creditors as and when they are due.
Mayor, the next ratio is a debt service cover ratio. It's basically just measures your turnover divided by your interest payments on your borrowings. OLG sets that you should have twice the amount of turnover to meet your borrowing cost. In this case, council has 6, so it's comfortably met that ratio.
This is how efficiently the council collects the rates and other payments from the ratepayers. Rates and annual charges outstanding ratio. And the benchmark for this is 10%, and the council has achieved that. So which means the total debt outstanding is less than 10%, which means they're collected in time, and the collection of rates appears to be working well.
This ratio, Mayor, is the cash expense coverage ratio. So all it's saying is that if at as at 30 June 2017, if council were to receive no more money, how many months of cash reserve it's got to survive? So council here has about, if it doesn't receive any cash, it can operate for 14 months. It's well above the OLG threshold of about 3 months. So council has completely met this ratio again.
So Mayor, building and infrastructure renewal ratio, this is another kind of a ratio which many councils are finding it difficult to meet. So obviously the council has not achieved the infrastructure renewal ratio, and it is a common challenge for councils in terms of how much you can replace and renew assets, and the depreciation increasing by revaluation and your additions and all that. So this is something. This is a challenge, and the council has not met the ratio. And I understand council has got plans to meet this ratio in the few years. So may I just want to share some of those common observations we have noted in the audit of 140 councils. These are kind of common observations which is on the board that does not apply to this council, so it's not a reflection on Armidale Regional Council. It's just for sharing this so that there can be some sort of ongoing supervision in these areas. So number of councils have been reported in terms of their ability to manage the information technology security. Probably the information technology access, computer system access controls, we have noted have not been satisfactory in many councils, and we have reported them to them, and it would come in the report of Parliament as well. Largely the access controls, apart from the cyber security, which is a heightened threat, how this is basic kind of access control. Number of councils, for example, there's some of the media item on Central Coast Council. It's a public knowledge. They've had number of super users who had ability to access and modify financial data, which is a high risk for any financial reporting organization. The second point was the difference in governance arrangements. So may I just want to probably highlight the case of the Botany Council. As you probably would have heard, that there has been about $4.2 million have been fraudulently misappropriated by a couple of officers there. And the external auditors and the internal auditors did report that. However, they did not attend the audit committee meetings or presented to the audit committee meetings this controls, and in terms of the appropriate preventive measures had not been implemented. So that continued for something like 3 or 4 years, simply because they did not follow the basic governance arrangements in terms of independent audit committee and the audit committee meeting the auditors and questioning them in terms of internal controls, effectiveness, and all that. The common observation in terms of other internal control, in terms of monthly reconciliation of general ledger balances and long outstanding unreconciled items, those are again opportunities for misappropriation, and that's another control weakness which we would report in the report of Parliament for many councils. So Mayor, the stocktake has identified assets which had been used by the council but not recorded in the general ledger. We found about 4 or 5 councils with large dollar value assets which had not been included in the financial statement, and we had to actually book them first time in the financial statement. So that is a reflection on how well the physical asset controls are being made. There had been interesting discussion you may have heard about valuation of community lands and land on the road. If you haven't heard, it's probably good, but there has been a number of councils who have had major corrections in this year's financial statements. And we probably have qualified one council, I think, because they did not make the correction in financial statements. So the key theme in this valuation of land under roads and the valuation of community land is the simple fact is that there is significant inherent limitations compared to a freehold land where a council could actually divest or dispose of assets. Whereas this community land or land under roads have got inherent limitations. You cannot do that without making the appropriate changes to make that parcel of land available for sale. So we want that valuation to include that recognition of the limitations. So that was the main thing. For example, land under roads is discounted by about 96% of the land adjoining the land. For example, in Sydney, George Street, land under the George Street is 96% less than the land on Town Hall Station or Woolies and Town Hall, by the way. So that is kind of a contested issue, Mr. Mayor, because the private valuers who had done this for other councils had very strong views, and we have come to a view now that they should be discounted, and that is in consultation with other professional firms and OLG as well. And the last one is the rural fire assets. Again, you would have heard that rural fire assets are booked in some councils, are not booked in some councils. So we are actually receiving more positions from various councils in terms of should they be booked or should not be booked. And I know the local council association, there has been some discussion, I think last week, I heard that there's some discussion on this one. At this point in time, Mr. Mayor, we are inclined to book that in the financial statements. A number of councils do not agree with that. We would listen to them in the next 6 months or so before we finalize the 30 June 18 financial statements. And that's all, Chair. I want to share it. If there are any questions, we're more than happy to take questions.
Wanting maybe to ask a question of John, if that's possible at some point.
I guess it depends on whether it's a question we're dealing with the report here. Is it going to be a question that's related to this report or something else?
Or just related to finances in general?
How about we leave that to a workshop? We'll deal with this because this is what we've got on the table. If there's no questions, then we'll resume standing orders. Can I get a mover and a second, please? Councillor Morat, Councillor Martin. All those in favour? Carried. So we have the motion for the extraordinary meeting, and we've heard the report from James, and I thank James and Kenneth for providing that report to us. And you all had a chance to question, so I'll put that to the in favour. Sorry. My apologies, Councillor Tiley. I jumped ahead. Can you turn your mic on too, please?
On. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I feel it's appropriate that I make just a few short points after having read the documents, including the special schedules, and given that the entire financial period was under my watch as administrator. I note some really pleasing things in the financial statements, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, that our overall debt is down from 32 million to 29 million. That's the principal on our debts. I note too that the employees' leave entitlement reserve has been increased from 2.9 million to a total of 5 million. And I think that's very healthy for a staff complement that we have. In relation to the borrowings, we didn't borrow a cent during the fiscal year under review, and the library, for example, was entirely financed from capital revenue. and therefore that means that when we borrow for the airport, as we surely will have to borrow up to 3 million, and that's what we've envisaged, that 3 million will be offset by our annual capacity to reduce our principal outstanding on loans by almost a similar amount, so that that 29 million should not increase because of the airport 3 major projects. I concur with James, and thank him for his presentation also, that most of our ratios are becoming satisfactory. I note that the debt service ratio will improve, seeing that this new council has agreed to embark upon a regime of sale of land for overdue rates after 15 years of no such sales. And he didn't talk too much about the 4 separate infrastructure ratios, and I acknowledge that they're not as good as they can be. But in that regard, I would say that given the merger fund, and all right, it's manna from heaven, I suppose some people say, but nevertheless, it's going to attack our road and bridge infrastructure backlog, and that's going to enhance those ratios over time when Mark and his team get to doing the projects. And the final thing that I'd say is that we had a healthy surplus in both water and sewage funds, and we have a good cash position in water and sewage funds. So we've got a long way to go as a council, as we'd all acknowledge, to achieve financial sustainability in the long term. But those few points that I've just made, I think, indicate that we're on the right path. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Tiley. Councillor Matt, do you want to voice? Any councillor wish to comment against? All right, then I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, well, that was the only item on the agenda, so I'll close the meeting at 1:28 p.m. Thank you very much.